They say life holds surprises even when you think you've seen it all. At 71, I believed my life would settle into a quiet rhythm, filled with books, my artwork, and occasional family visits. But then, Aaron arrived. Our bond began innocently, born out of friendly conversations over the fence and the music drifting from his guitar into my living room each evening. I told myself it was nothing more than companionship, a brief distraction from my quiet routines. But over time, things changed. I changed. Keeping our connection hidden wasn't easy, especially when my daughter Rachel returned home, her own life in pieces and in need of stability. I found myself living two lives, one as the dependable mother she knew, the other as a woman rediscovering passions I thought I'd left behind. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and soon the walls I had carefully built began to crumble. A simple, quiet life suddenly became tangled with secrets, accusations, and choices I never imagined facing. Looking back, I wonder, was it worth the risk? The first time I heard Aaron play, I was watering the plants by the window. His music drifted through the open air, a soft, soulful melody that brought memories rushing back, memories of moments I'd thought were long behind me. I looked out, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. He was young, much younger than I'd realized, a slim figure with dark, wavy hair and an intense focus as his fingers danced across the guitar strings. I watched him for a few moments, entranced by the music and his expression, one that seemed lost in another world. A few days later, while tending to my garden, I saw him working on his own yard, setting up a modest collection of potted plants. I called over, and he looked up, surprised, his gaze warm and friendly. "Hello there," he said, smiling. "I hope my playing isn't too loud." "Oh no," I replied, taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. "I enjoy it. Your music, it has a way of taking me back." He looked intrigued, coming over to the fence that separated our yards. "Taking you back? To where?" I smiled, a bit shy to share. "To a time when I felt more alive, I suppose." He nodded, thoughtful. "Well, music has that effect, doesn't it? I'm Aaron, by the way." I introduced myself, and that was how it began. Just a friendly conversation with a neighbor, nothing more. Or so I told myself. Aaron and I started talking more frequently after that, our conversations growing deeper as we shared snippets of our lives. He'd tell me about his struggles as a musician, how he felt out of place in his family, the loneliness that accompanied his creative path. I listened, understanding more than I expected to. In turn, I shared pieces of my own life, memories from my younger years, tales of raising Rachel, and my passion for art. Aaron seemed genuinely interested, listening intently and asking questions that brought long-forgotten moments back to life. With him, I felt seen, not as a widow or a mother, but as myself. One evening, while the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, we sat on my back porch, sharing a cup of tea. I remember looking over at him, realizing how much he had become a part of my days, my thoughts. He had a way of bringing lightness into conversations, even in his quiet moments, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. But that happiness came with an undercurrent of fear. I wondered if the connection I felt was mutual or if it was simply a product of my imagination, a desire for companionship I hadn't dared to acknowledge before. As we sat there, he turned to me, his eyes thoughtful. "Martha, have you ever felt like you were meant to meet someone, even if it didn't make sense?" His words struck a chord, one I hadn't expected to feel. "Yes," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think I know exactly what you mean." In that moment, I knew that our friendship was no longer as simple as I'd thought. It had crossed into something deeper, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Rachel's arrival was both a surprise and a shock. I opened the door to see her standing there, bags in hand, looking weary and lost. She'd been through a breakup, one that had left her shaken and in need of support. I welcomed her in with open arms, my own concerns for Aaron and our connection pushed to the background. Having her around was comforting. We fell into an old rhythm, cooking together, sharing stories, and rediscovering the mother-daughter bond that had become strained over the years. But Rachel was perceptive, more so than I'd realized. She noticed every change, every distracted look, every moment I hesitated when Aaron came up in conversation. One evening, as we were washing dishes together, she turned to me, her eyes curious. "Mom, you seem different lately. Happier even. Is there someone in your life?" Her question caught me off guard, my heart racing as I tried to deflect. "Oh, Rachel, it's just the joy of having you home again." She smiled, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, if there's something you want to share, I'm here." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, feeling the weight of my choices. My connection with Aaron was no longer a simple friendship, and I knew it would only grow more complicated with Rachel around. But ending it felt impossible. He had become too important, too meaningful in ways I hadn't anticipated. Aaron and I met one evening in the quiet space between our houses, drawn to each other by an unspoken understanding. He looked at me, his expression soft, and for a moment we simply stood in silence. Then, without thinking, he reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. "Martha," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion, "I don't know what this is between us, but I can't ignore it. Being with you, it makes me feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." His words were a balm to my soul, filling a space within me that had long been empty. I felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of joy and guilt, and without another thought, I leaned in, our lips meeting in a kiss that was both gentle and filled with longing. In that moment, the world faded, leaving only the warmth of his touch, the softness of his breath. It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unexpected places. But as we pulled away, the reality of our situation settled over me. I was a mother, a widow, a woman who had spent her life upholding certain values. And yet here I was, risking everything for a love that was as beautiful as it was forbidden. Our relationship became a carefully guarded secret, a love that existed in the hidden moments, the whispered words, the shared glances when no one was watching. We met in secluded corners, our conversations filled with laughter, our time together a sanctuary from the judgments of the outside world. But secrecy came with its own weight, a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. Rachel was a constant presence, her perceptive nature making it harder to keep my love for Aaron hidden. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to end it. He had become a part of me, a source of joy I hadn't known in years. One evening, after Rachel had gone out with friends, Aaron came over, and we shared a quiet dinner by candlelight. As he looked at me, his gaze filled with warmth and love, I felt a sense of peace, a happiness that felt both fragile and precious. But even in those moments of joy, a shadow lingered. I knew that our love, as beautiful as it was built on a foundation of secrecy and risk. And with Rachel so close, I feared that the walls I had built to protect our love would soon come crashing down. The first signs of Rachel's growing suspicion came subtly. She would glance over at me with a curious look whenever I returned from my time in the garden or when Aaron's name slipped into our conversations. It was as though she could sense there was more going on than I dared to reveal. One afternoon, I noticed Rachel and her friend Sophie sitting on the porch, their heads close together, in conversation. Sophie had always been a loyal friend to Rachel, someone who offered advice and shared in both her joys and troubles. But I sensed a different energy in their conversation that day, an intensity that left me uneasy. That evening, as I cleared the dinner plates, Rachel turned to me, her voice calm but probing. "Mom, I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with Aaron. He's an interesting friend, isn't he?" Her words carried a subtle accusation, a reminder that I had been walking a dangerous line. I forced a smile, hoping to keep things light. "He's a kind young man, Rachel, and I enjoy his company. It's nice to talk to someone with a fresh perspective." Rachel exchanged a glance with Sophie, who raised an eyebrow. "Fresh perspective? Is that what they're calling it these days?" Sophie said with a smirk, her tone sharper than usual. I felt a pang of defensiveness, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean, Sophie. Aaron is a neighbor and a friend, nothing more." But Sophie's probing expression lingered, and as the evening went on, I felt the weight of their watchful eyes, a reminder that the life I had been hiding was dangerously close to being exposed. As days passed, Sophie continued her quiet investigation, making subtle comments and asking questions that left me feeling cornered. I realized that Rachel, guided by her friend's suspicions, was becoming increasingly wary of my behavior, her usual warmth replaced by a cautious distance that left me feeling both guilty and vulnerable. Then one evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. Henry, an old family friend and a confidant of my late husband. Henry had always looked out for me, especially after my husband passed, offering support and advice when I needed it most. Seeing him at my door filled me with a mix of relief and dread, as I sensed that his visit was more than just a social call. "Martha," he began after we settled in the living room, "I've heard things I don't fully understand. Rachel and Sophie have been talking, and I wanted to hear it from you directly." I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my composure. "What exactly have they told you, Henry?" "They're concerned, Martha. Rachel thinks you've become close with Aaron, too close for comfort. She's worried that you're making choices that could hurt the family, hurt her." His voice was gentle, but the weight of his words felt heavy, a reminder of the boundaries I had crossed. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Henry, I didn't plan for any of this. Aaron and we found something unexpected, something that brought me joy. I know it's unconventional, but it's real." Henry's expression softened, but his concern remained. "Martha, I don't doubt the sincerity of your feelings, but Rachel, she's struggling to understand. And Sophie, she's feeding her doubts. You need to be careful, to think about the impact of your choices on your family." His words lingered long after he left, a reminder that my love for Aaron, though genuine, had consequences that reached far beyond our shared moments. I knew that if I continued down this path, I risked losing the family and friendships I cherished most. The tension grew each day, an unspoken weight that settled over every conversation, every glance. I tried to carry on as though nothing had changed, but the watchful eyes of Rachel and Sophie followed my every move, each moment with Aaron carefully calculated to avoid detection. One evening, Rachel announced she'd be going out with Sophie for a few hours, giving me a brief sense of relief. With her gone, I invited Aaron over, eager for the brief moments we could share without fear of judgment. We talked, laughed, and for a few precious hours, I felt the weight of secrecy lift. But as he leaned in to kiss me, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced, and I quickly pulled away, motioning for Aaron to leave through the side door. Just as he slipped out of sight, Rachel walked in, her expression unreadable. I forced a smile, hoping to appear composed. "Rachel, you're back earlier than I expected." She narrowed her eyes, her gaze sweeping the room. "It looks like I interrupted something. Who was here, Mom?" The accusation in her tone left me momentarily speechless, and I could feel my face flush. "No one, Rachel, I was just straightening up a bit." But she didn't seem convinced, her suspicion deepening. "You know, Mom, I may have been away, but I'm not blind. Something's going on, and I'd appreciate the truth." Her words echoed in my mind long after she left, a stark reminder of the fragile web of lies I had woven, a warning that my hidden love was on the brink of discovery. Rachel's suspicion reached a boiling point one evening when she confronted me directly, her face a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Mom, I've tried to be patient, to give you space, but I can't ignore what's right in front of me. Are you involved with Aaron?" Her question cut deep, a stark reminder of the line I had crossed. I took a deep breath, struggling to find the words. "Rachel, Aaron and I have grown close. But it's more complicated than you think." "Complicated?" Her voice rose, a mix of disbelief and anger. "Mom, he's younger than me. What could you possibly have in common with him? Don't you see how wrong this is?" I looked away, feeling a wave of shame wash over me. "Rachel, I never meant for this to happen. It's just, he made me feel alive again, like I hadn't in years. I know it's unconventional, but it's real." But my explanation did little to soften her anger. "What about Dad? What about the life you built together? Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Her words struck a chord, each accusation a painful reminder of the loyalty I had once held to my late husband, a love I thought would never be replaced. And yet, here I was, risking everything for a connection I couldn't deny. "Rachel, I loved your father deeply. But he's gone, and I've spent years trying to fill that emptiness. Aaron brought something back into my life, something I didn't know I was missing." Her gaze softened, but the hurt remained. I just don't understand, Mom. I thought I knew you, but now, I don't know what to think." With that, she turned and left the room, leaving me standing in silence, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. A reminder that love, even in its beauty, came with consequences I could no longer ignore. The next day, Aaron sensed my distress and came to see me, his gaze filled with both love and concern. "Martha, I know this hasn't been easy, and I don't want to be the reason you're hurting." I looked at him, feeling the warmth of his presence, the depth of the connection we had shared. "Aaron, you've been a source of joy in my life, a gift I never expected, but this has come at a cost I hadn't anticipated." He nodded, his gaze turning thoughtful. "There's something I need to tell you, Martha. I didn't come to this neighborhood by chance. I knew who you were, who your husband was. I looked up to him, even though we never met. I came here because I wanted to understand the life he'd built, the legacy he left." His confession hit me like a wave, a mixture of surprise and betrayal. I felt a sense of loss, realizing that what I thought had been a chance meeting was rooted in something deeper, something I hadn't fully understood. "Aaron, I don't know what to say," I whispered, feeling my world shift, my trust in him wavering. He reached for my hand, his touch gentle. "I didn't mean for things to go this far, but I fell in love with you, Martha. I fell in love with the life you've created, the strength you hold, and I don't want to lose that." His words brought a tear to my eye, a mixture of love and sorrow that left me feeling both comforted and torn. I knew that our love, though genuine, was built on a foundation I could no longer trust, a reminder that the choices I had made had consequences that reached far beyond our hidden moments. After Aaron's confession, I spent the next few days in a daze, the gravity of our relationship pressing down on me in ways I hadn't felt before. The thought that he'd come into my life because of my late husband's legacy, rather than through chance, left me questioning everything we'd shared. The sincerity I'd once believed in was now muddied by doubts and second-guessing. But I knew that my feelings for him, however conflicted, were still real. And yet, Rachel's reaction had reminded me of the responsibilities I held, the loyalty I owed to my family. One afternoon, as I walked through the garden, Aaron joined me, his expression both solemn and hopeful. "Martha," he began, reaching for my hand, "I know that things haven't turned out as we expected, but I'm willing to make this work if you are." His words hung in the air, offering both comfort and conflict. I looked at him, feeling the love that had grown between us, a connection that had brought me joy even as it created turmoil in my life. "Aaron," I whispered, my voice heavy with emotion, what we have, it's beautiful, but it's also complicated. My daughter, my family, they need me to be their rock, their stability. And right now, our relationship is bringing them more pain than joy." He nodded, his gaze filled with sorrow and acceptance. "I understand, Martha. I never wanted to hurt you or your family. I want you to know that I love you, and that's real, no matter how it started." We stood in silence, our hands intertwined, each of us knowing that this was goodbye. As he left, I felt both the ache of loss and the comfort of resolution, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes love means knowing when to let go. In the days that followed, I focused on mending my relationship with Rachel. The air between us was still filled with tension, but I could see that she was open to finding a path forward, to understanding the choices that had led me to Aaron. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Rachel, I know that the past few weeks have been difficult, and I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you or dishonor your father's memory. I was lonely, more than I even realized, and Aaron, he reminded me of parts of myself I thought were gone." Rachel looked at me, her gaze softer, filled with a mixture of compassion and lingering hurt. "I think I understand, Mom. It's just, I didn't expect it, and seeing you with someone so young, it made me question everything I thought I knew about you." I reached for her hand, grateful for her honesty. "I know it was unexpected, and I'm sorry for the pain it caused. You and your father, he'll always be my foundation, the loves of my life. But I also needed to find something of myself in the years since he's been gone. I hope you can understand." She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I think I can, and I want you to be happy, Mom, even if that happiness doesn't always make sense to me." With that, we shared a quiet embrace, a moment of forgiveness that felt like a fresh start. I could feel the weight of guilt lifting, replaced by a new sense of acceptance and understanding. And in the days that followed, our relationship grew stronger, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and compassion. Henry, too, became a steady presence in my life, offering his friendship and support as I navigated the changes around me. His quiet strength reminded me that while love could be intense and fleeting, friendship and loyalty were equally valuable, helping to carry me forward. With the whirlwind of emotions settling, I found myself drawn to the quiet comfort of my art, spending hours at my easel, pouring my heart onto the canvas. Each brushstroke felt like a release, a way of processing the love, loss, and healing that had marked the past few months. I reflected on my relationship with Aaron, acknowledging both the joy it had brought me and the lessons I had learned. One afternoon, I decided to write down my thoughts, filling page after page with memories of our time together, the laughter we shared, the conversations that had made me feel young again. It was a farewell of sorts, a way to honor what we had while also letting it go. As I wrote, I realized that Aaron's presence had given me a renewed sense of self, a reminder that life held beauty, even in its most unexpected moments. I understood now that my time with him was a gift, a brief chapter in my life that would forever remain a part of me, even as I moved forward. My reflections brought a sense of peace, a quiet strength that allowed me to look toward the future with hope and resilience. I knew that the love I had found, though fleeting, had left me stronger, more aware of who I was and what I valued. With a renewed sense of self, I began to reconnect with the world around me, rekindling old friendships and finding joy in new pursuits. I reached out to the local art community, offering to teach painting classes to those interested in exploring their own creativity. The classes brought a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in years, a purpose that went beyond myself. The students, ranging in age and skill, each brought a unique energy to the class, and their eagerness to learn reminded me of the joy that art could bring to one's life. In their company, I felt my own creativity flourish, each lesson a reminder of the beauty that could be found in life's small moments. Henry would occasionally join the classes, his quiet support a constant in my life. We'd share coffee afterward, exchanging stories and laughter, our companionship deepening in ways that felt natural and comforting. With him, I found a friendship that was steady and reassuring, a reminder that love existed in many forms, each valuable in its own way. As the weeks passed, I felt a sense of fulfillment and contentment, a knowledge that I was finally at peace with both the past and the present, ready to embrace the future on my own terms. Months later, I attended an art exhibition in the city, my heart filled with excitement and anticipation. The gallery was filled with people from all walks of life, each admiring the artwork that lined the walls. As I walked through the space, I felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the world of creativity that had always been a part of me. At one point, I found myself speaking with a fellow artist, a woman with a kind smile and a shared love for capturing life's fleeting moments. We exchanged stories about our creative journeys, our struggles, and our triumphs. In her company, I felt a renewed sense of possibility, a thrill that reminded me of the richness that life still held. Looking around the gallery, I realized that my journey with Aaron, while brief, had led me here, to a place of self-discovery, growth, and purpose. His presence had been a catalyst, a spark that had reignited my passion for life, for art, for connection. And though he was no longer a part of my days, the memories we'd created would forever remain, a quiet but cherished part of who I was. As the evening came to a close, I felt a sense of closure, a peace that settled over me like a warm embrace. I knew that I was ready to move forward, to build a life filled with joy, creativity, and the friendships that had sustained me. With a heart filled with gratitude, I stepped out into the night, ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that I was stronger, wiser, and more open to life's endless possibilities. The garden was quiet as I sat on the porch, watching the roses sway gently in the breeze. The past few months had been a journey of love, loss, healing, and self-discovery. Aaron's memory lingered like a soft melody, a reminder of the joy he had brought into my life, the lessons I had learned from our time together. Rachel joined me on the porch, her presence a comfort as we sat in peaceful silence. "I'm glad you found something to inspire you again, Mom," she said, her voice filled with warmth. I smiled, feeling the fullness of her words. "Thank you, Rachel. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" She nodded, and together we watched the sun dip below the horizon. the sky painted with hues of pink and gold. I knew that my life, though marked by unexpected twists and challenges, had brought me to a place of peace, a place where I could move forward with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose. And as the stars appeared overhead, I felt a quiet confidence, a knowledge that I was ready for whatever life had to offer, ready to embrace each moment with grace and gratitude. I never imagined how fragile my life was, how easily everything I had built could shatter in a single night. But that's exactly what happened. It started with the storm. The power went out just after sunset, plunging the house into darkness. Victor was away as usual, leaving me alone with his son, Ezra. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just a blackout, a minor inconvenience. But by the time the power came back on, nothing about my life would be the same. Ezra wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to look at me the way he did, or touch me the way he did. And I wasn't supposed to let him. But in that moment, with the world around us stripped bare, something happened. I wish I could say it ended there, that we both came to our senses and moved on. But that night was only the beginning. What came after was a nightmare of secrets and lies, a web of deceit that ensnared me and dragged me into the darkness. If I had known what Ezra was planning, what he was capable of, I might have stopped it. But I didn't. And now, there's no going back. Looking back, it's easy to pinpoint the exact moment everything began to unravel. It wasn't a grand event or some dramatic revelation. It was a simple power outage on a quiet, stormy night. Victor had left for Chicago earlier that morning for one of his endless business trips, his briefcase in hand and a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. Back by Friday, he had said, the words as hollow as the marriage we'd been clinging to for nearly 2 decades. I didn't mind being alone in our sprawling home. Over the years, I'd grown accustomed to it. Solitude had become a comfortable companion. What I wasn't accustomed to was sharing that solitude with Ezra. Ezra had moved back into the guest house a month prior, citing a string of bad luck, a failed tech startup, a soured relationship, and mounting debt. At 34, he was charming, quick-witted, and entirely too confident for someone who had lost nearly everything. Victor welcomed him with open arms, proud of his son's resilience. I, on the other hand, felt uneasy. There was something about Ezra that unsettled me. It wasn't just his sharp features, which bore an uncanny resemblance to a younger Victor, or his habit of staring a little too long. It was the way he carried himself, as though the world owed him something. That evening, the storm rolled in without warning. Heavy rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a restless spirit. I had just settled in the living room with a cup of tea and a book when the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out entirely. I sighed, setting the book aside. The power outages weren't uncommon in our secluded countryside neighborhood, but they were always inconvenient. I fumbled in the dark, making my way to the kitchen to retrieve the emergency candles. Need some help? I nearly dropped the flashlight I had just found. Turning, I saw Ezra standing in the doorway, his tall frame illuminated by the dim light of his phone. I didn't hear you come in, I said, pressing a hand to my chest to steady my nerves. I figured you might need a hand, he said, stepping into the room. It's pitch black in here. He wasn't wrong. Without the hum of electricity, the house felt eerily quiet, the shadows stretching long and deep. Candles are in the drawer, I said, gesturing toward the kitchen island. Ezra found them quickly, lighting one and holding it up like a torch. There. Instant ambiance, he said with a grin. I couldn't help but laugh. You're awfully cheerful for someone stuck in the dark. Better than sulking about it, he replied, setting the candle down on the counter. We moved around the house, lighting more candles until the main rooms glowed with a soft, flickering warmth. By the time we finished, the storm outside had intensified, thunder rumbling in the distance. Back in the living room, I resumed my spot on the couch, but the book in my lap felt heavier than before. Ezra joined me, sinking into the armchair opposite. Victor called, he said, breaking the silence. Said the weather's worse in Chicago, he might stay an extra day. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. That's typical. Ezra leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Doesn't that bother you? What? That he's never here, Ezra said, his tone light but probing. I hesitated. He's always been busy, it's just who he is. Ezra tilted his head, studying me. And you're okay with that? I opened my mouth to respond but found I didn't have an answer. Was I okay with it? I wasn't sure anymore. I'm sorry, Ezra said, leaning back. I didn't mean to pry. It's fine, I said quickly, waving him off. It's just complicated. Ezra nodded, as though he understood. Complicated seems to run in this family. The conversation drifted into safer territory after that. Ezra told me about his failed startup, about the partners who had betrayed him, and the financial ruin he was now trying to claw his way out of. I thought I was untouchable, he admitted, swirling the whiskey he'd poured himself. Turns out, I was just naive. You're not the first to fail, I said gently, and you won't be the last. What matters is what you do next. Ezra smiled, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his usual bravado. You sound like my dad. Do I? Yeah, he said, nodding. But kinder. Less judgmental. There it was again, that lingering stare, like he was searching for something in my expression. I shifted uncomfortably, reaching for my tea to give myself something to do. As the hours wore on, the storm showed no signs of letting up. The wind howled, and the rain pounded against the windows in relentless sheets. I glanced at the clock, surprised to see it was nearing midnight. You should get some sleep, I said, setting my empty mug on the coffee table. Ezra shrugged. Not tired. Well, I am, I said, rising from the couch. He stood as well, walking me to the hallway. Thanks for tonight, he said, his voice soft. It's been nice. Good night, Ezra, I said, avoiding his gaze as I turned toward my room. But as I reached for the door, I felt a hand on my arm. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Meredith? He said, his voice low. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. His hand lingered on my arm, his touch warm despite the chill in the air. For a moment, neither of us moved. The house was silent, save for the distant rumble of thunder. He began, but then he let go, stepping back. Good night, I nodded, slipping into my room and closing the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I leaned against the door, my mind racing. What had just happened? That night, I lay awake, replaying the moment over and over. Ezra's touch, the look in his eyes, it was as though he had seen right through me, past the walls I had carefully built over the years. I told myself it was nothing, a fleeting moment born out of the strange intimacy of the blackout. But deep down, I knew better. The storm raged on outside, the wind rattling the windows. And in the dark, I felt a sense of unease settle over me, as though the storm had stirred something far more dangerous than the weather. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every creak of the old house, every distant rumble of thunder, felt amplified in the silence. I tossed and turned, my mind drifting to Ezra, despite my best efforts to focus on anything else. The touch on my arm, so brief, so innocuous, lingered like an imprint on my skin. It wasn't just the act itself, but the way he'd looked at me, as though there was something unspoken between us. I was being ridiculous, of course. I was old enough to be his mother, and whatever momentary lapse had occurred, it was nothing. A blackout, a shared vulnerability, that was all it was. Or so I told myself. Sometime after midnight, the storm took a turn for the worse. A loud crack of thunder jolted me awake, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. My heart raced as I grabbed my robe and hurried out of my room, my bare feet padding softly against the hardwood floor. The hallway was pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of the candles we'd left burning in the living room. As I descended the stairs, I saw Ezra already there, inspecting the source of the noise. It's the sunroom, he said, turning toward me. His shirt was rumpled, his hair slightly disheveled, as though he'd just woken up too. Together, we stepped into the sunroom, where one of the large windows had shattered, rain pouring in through the jagged edges. I'll cover it, Ezra said, grabbing a tarp from the corner. You shouldn't be out here in this weather. Ignoring his comment, I moved to help him. Together, we wrestled with the tarp, trying to secure it over the broken glass. The rain was relentless, soaking through our clothes as the wind howled around us. By the time we were finished, we were both drenched and shivering. You should change, Ezra said, his voice barely audible over the storm. So should you, I replied, hugging myself for warmth. We retreated to the hallway, where I paused to catch my breath. Ezra stood close, his presence almost too much in the dim candlelight. His shirt clung to his chest and droplets of water glistened on his skin. Thank you for helping, I said, my voice softer than I intended. Of course, he replied, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. The tension from earlier had returned, thick and suffocating. I turned to leave, but Ezra reached out, his hand brushing against mine. Meredith, he said quietly. I froze, my pulse quickening. Don't, I said, my voice trembling. I wasn't sure if I meant it as a warning or a plea. I'm sorry, he said, stepping back. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's fine, I lied, my heart pounding in my chest. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. I hurried upstairs without another word, retreating to the safety of my room. I pressed my back against the door, struggling to catch my breath. What was happening? Why did I feel this way? The rest of the night passed in a haze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't quiet the thoughts racing through my mind. The storm began to subside just before dawn, leaving the house eerily still. By morning, the power was still out, but the rain had stopped. The broken window was a stark reminder of the night before, the tarp flapping gently in the breeze. Ezra was in the kitchen when I came downstairs preparing coffee on a gas burner. He greeted me with a smile as though nothing had happened. Morning, he said, handing me a cup. Morning, I replied, avoiding his gaze. The air between us was heavy with unspoken tension. I wanted to address what had happened, to clear the air, but the words wouldn't come. The day dragged on, the power still out and the house eerily quiet. I busied myself with small tasks, sweeping the glass from the sunroom, tidying the kitchen, but I couldn't escape the weight of Ezra's presence. He was always there, his gaze lingering a little too long, his touch a little too casual. By evening, I was at my wits' end. The combination of the storm, the blackout, and my sleepless night had left me raw and vulnerable. When Ezra suggested we open a bottle of wine to pass the time, I didn't protest. We sat in the living room, the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. The wine flowed freely, loosening my tongue and dulling my inhibitions. You don't have to do this, you know, Ezra said suddenly, breaking the silence. Do what? I asked, looking up at him. Pretend everything's fine, he said, his tone gentle. You've been carrying a lot, haven't you? I hesitated, unsure how to respond. You're always so composed, he continued. But I see it, the way you hold yourself, the way you avoid talking about certain things. It's okay to let go, Meredith. His words hit me harder than I expected. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes and quickly looked away. It's not that simple, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Why not? He asked, his gaze steady. Because it's complicated, I said, echoing my words from the night before. Because I've spent so long building this life, and I'm not sure I know who I am without it. Ezra leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. Maybe it's time to find out. Before I knew it, he was beside me on the couch, his hand resting lightly on mine. My breath caught as he leaned closer, his warmth radiating through the space between us. Ezra, I said, my voice trembling, we can't. Why not? He asked softly. Because it's wrong, I replied, though my conviction was fading fast. Does it feel wrong? He asked, his voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The moment stretched on, the world outside fading into nothingness. And then, before I could stop myself, I closed the distance between us. It was over in an instant, a fleeting moment of weakness that left me breathless and reeling. I pulled away, my mind racing with guilt and confusion. This can't happen, I said, my voice shaking. Ezra didn't argue. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I stood abruptly, retreating to my room without another word. The rest of the night was a blur. I lay awake, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment that would never happen again. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever line we had crossed, there was no going back. The morning after, I woke with a knot in my stomach. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind in excruciating detail. I could still feel Ezra's touch, the warmth of his breath against my skin, the unspoken words hanging between us. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint sunlight streaming through the curtains. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a calm, overcast sky in its wake. But inside, the storm was far from over. I dressed quickly, tying my robe tightly around me as if it could shield me from my own thoughts. The hallway was silent as I made my way downstairs, hoping Ezra was still asleep. But he wasn't. He was in the kitchen, dressed casually in a t-shirt and jeans, his hair damp as if he'd just showered. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he said, his tone neutral. "Morning," I replied, avoiding his gaze. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with everything unsaid. I busied myself with the coffee maker, fumbling with the filters and grounds. My hands shook as I poured water into the machine. "Meredith," Ezra said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "About last night," he began, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Don't," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "We shouldn't talk about it." Ezra's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "If that's what you want." "It's what's best," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The day dragged on in excruciating silence. The power returned in the early afternoon, and with it, a sense of normalcy I desperately clung to. I threw myself into cleaning the house, scrubbing counters and folding laundry until my hands ached. Ezra stayed out of my way, retreating to the guest house where he'd been staying. I told myself it was for the best, that space would help us both regain perspective. But the space only gave me more time to think. When Victor returned that evening, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. He walked through the door with his usual air of authority, setting his briefcase down in the entryway and greeting me with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Everything all right while I was gone?" he asked, shrugging off his coat. "Yes," I said quickly. "The storm knocked out the power for a while, but we managed." "Good," he said, nodding. "I trust Ezra was helpful." I hesitated, then forced a smile. "Of course." Victor didn't notice the tremor in my voice. He never did. The next few days were a masterclass in avoidance. I threw myself into my routines, avoiding Ezra at every opportunity. When we did cross paths, we kept our conversations polite and superficial, as though we were strangers sharing the same house. But the tension never went away. It lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the line we'd crossed. It wasn't until I stumbled upon Ezra's laptop that everything began to unravel. I was in the guest house, bringing over a basket of freshly folded laundry. Ezra wasn't there. He'd gone into town to run errands, but his laptop was open on the desk, its screen glowing faintly. I should have ignored it. I should have left the laundry and walked away. But something about the open screen drew me in. It was a document, filled with notes and numbers that didn't make sense at first glance. Curious, I scrolled through it, my unease growing with every line. The document wasn't work-related, it was about Victor. Page after page detailed Victor's finances. Bank accounts, investments, even his offshore holdings. There were notes about suspicious transactions, as well as a section labeled leverage. My blood ran cold as I read the list beneath that heading. Victor's alleged business connections to questionable individuals. A recording of a heated phone call between Victor and a former associate. Potential evidence of tax evasion. And at the bottom of the list, a single chilling bullet point. Meredith. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced with questions. Why was Ezra investigating Victor? What did he plan to do with the information? And why was my name on that list? I didn't have to wait long for answers. Ezra returned an hour later, whistling softly as he stepped through the door. He stopped short when he saw me standing in the middle of the room, his laptop in my hands. "What's this?" I demanded, holding up the device. Ezra's expression shifted from surprise to something colder, more calculated. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it as he crossed his arms. "You went through my things," he said, his tone calm but accusing. "You're damn right I did," I shot back. "What is this, Ezra? Why are you digging into Victor's life?" Ezra sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," I said, my voice shaking. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're planning something." He hesitated, then stepped closer, his eyes locked onto mine. "Victor isn't who you think he is, Meredith. He's been hiding things, illegal things, for years. I needed proof." "Proof for what?" "For leverage," Ezra admitted. "Victor doesn't respect me. He never has. This was my way of evening the playing field." My stomach churned at his words. And me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What was I leveraged to? Ezra's expression softened. No, he said firmly, you're different. Am I? I asked, tears stinging my eyes. Because I feel like a pawn in whatever game you're playing. You're not a pawn, Ezra said, stepping closer. You're the only real thing in all of this. I shook my head, stepping back. I can't do this, Ezra. I can't be a part of this. You already are, he said quietly. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. I was already entangled in his web, whether I liked it or not. That night, I couldn't sleep. Victor's steady breathing beside me was a reminder of everything I stood to lose. Ezra had manipulated me, used me, and yet a part of me still felt drawn to him. I hated myself for it, for the weakness that had led me to this moment. But one thing was clear. I had to protect myself. Whatever Ezra was planning, I couldn't let him drag me down with him. The days following my discovery of Ezra's plan were a delicate dance of avoidance and pretense. Every conversation with Victor felt like walking a tightrope. Every glance from Ezra, a silent reminder of the secrets we shared. The house, once a place of solitude and comfort, now felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Ezra was careful not to push me too far. He didn't mention the confrontation in the guest house, didn't try to justify his actions. But his presence was constant, a quiet force that made it impossible for me to forget what I knew. Victor, blissfully unaware, remained absorbed in his work. But his growing irritation with Ezra was impossible to ignore. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Victor looked up from his laptop with a frown. Do you ever wonder why Ezra is still here? He asked, his tone casual but pointed. I froze, my hands tightening around the silverware. He's going through a rough patch, I said carefully. He needs time. Victor snorted. He's had plenty of time, but all I've seen him do is mooch off us and avoid responsibility. He's your son, I reminded him, my voice sharper than I intended. And that doesn't give him a free pass to take advantage of me, Victor said. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I've given him more chances than he deserves. I didn't respond, my heart pounding in my chest. Was Victor onto something? Did he suspect Ezra was up to no good? The answer came 2 days later when I found a business card tucked into Victor's briefcase. Malcolm Kent, Private Investigations. That night, as Victor snored softly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. If Victor had hired a private investigator, it was only a matter of time before he uncovered Ezra's activities, and possibly even the moments Ezra and I had shared. I couldn't let that happen. The next morning, I went to the guest house. Ezra was seated at his desk, typing away on his laptop. He looked up as I entered, his expression cautious. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. I'm guessing this isn't a friendly visit, he replied, leaning back in his chair. Victor hired a private investigator, I said bluntly. Ezra's eyes narrowed. Did he tell you that? No, I admitted. I saw the card in his briefcase. Ezra's jaw tightened, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. That's inconvenient. Inconvenient? I snapped. Ezra, he's going to find out what you're doing, and if he does, he'll ruin you. He might even ruin me. Ezra stood, closing the distance between us. Then we need to act before he does. What are you talking about? I asked, my stomach twisting. We can turn this around, he said, his voice calm but firm. We expose Victor first. We take what we know and use it against him. Expose him how? I asked, my voice trembling. Ezra picked up a folder from his desk, flipping it open to reveal pages of detailed notes, financial records, and incriminating emails. This, he said, holding it up. It's all here. His connections to shell companies, the money laundering, the offshore accounts. We take this to the authorities and he's finished. I stared at the folder, my mind racing. Ezra's plan was bold, dangerous, and entirely too risky. And what happens to us? I asked. Do you think Victor will just let us walk away? Ezra's expression darkened. He won't have a choice. Once this goes public, he'll be too busy saving himself to come after us. I wanted to believe him, but something about his confidence felt hollow, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. That evening, Victor cornered me in the kitchen. His expression was unreadable, but there was an edge to his voice that set me on edge. Have you noticed anything strange about Ezra lately? He asked. Strange? I echoed, trying to keep my voice steady. He's been secretive, Victor said. I've caught him on the phone late at night, and he's been asking questions about my business. Questions he has no reason to ask. My heart raced as I struggled to come up with a response. He's probably just curious, I said weakly. You know how he is. Victor didn't look convinced. I've been too lenient with him, he said, more to himself than to me. It's time I put an end to his games. That night, Ezra came to me with a new plan. We can't wait any longer, he said, his voice urgent. Victor is on to us. We need to act now. And what exactly do you expect me to do? I asked, my voice laced with frustration. Ezra stepped closer, lowering his voice. I need you to help me get into his office. There are files on his computer, files that could seal his fate. If we get them, we'll have everything we need. Ezra, this is insane, I said, shaking my head. You're going to get us both killed. Not if we're smart about it, he said. But I wasn't sure we were being smart at all. While Victor was out the next day, I worked up the courage to enter his office. My hands shook as I rifled through his drawers, searching for anything that might explain the secrets Ezra had hinted at. I found it in a locked drawer, a folder filled with photographs, financial records, and a small USB drive. The photos were grainy, but unmistakable. Ezra meeting with a man I didn't recognize, exchanging what looked like an envelope full of cash. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the implications. Victor wasn't the one being investigated. Ezra was. When I confronted Ezra that evening, his calm demeanor cracked. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising. Victor's been trying to frame me. He's been building a case against me for months. And why would he do that? I asked, my voice trembling. Because he's paranoid. Ezra snapped. He can't stand the idea of me succeeding. He'd rather destroy me than see me win. I stared at him, unsure of what to believe. Was Ezra telling the truth, or was he manipulating me again? By the time Victor returned that evening, the tension in the house was unbearable. I felt trapped between two men, each with their own agenda, each pulling me deeper into a web of lies and deceit. And then, Victor dropped the final bombshell. I know what you've been hiding, he said, his eyes boring into mine. What are you talking about? I asked, feigning ignorance. Victor smirked, holding up the USB drive. You didn't think I'd find out? You didn't think I'd notice what's been going on under my own roof? I felt the blood drain from my face as the room seemed to tilt. Everything was about to come crashing down, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Victor's words hung in the air, thick and heavy. I know what you've been hiding, he repeated, the USB drive gleaming between his fingers. My mouth went dry, my mind racing for a response. Did he know about Ezra's plans? Or worse, did he know about us? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to my own ears. Victor's smirk widened. Don't play coy with me, Meredith. I've been watching, and I'm not as oblivious as you'd like to think. He tossed the USB drive onto the desk between us, the sound sharp and final. Care to explain why my son has been digging into my finances? My stomach dropped. Of course, he was focused on Ezra. He didn't know about the affair, at least not yet. Ezra's been curious, I said carefully. He feels like you've shut him out of the family. Maybe he wanted to understand your world better. Victor's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. Curious doesn't justify espionage, he said coldly. And you, what do you know about this? Nothing, I lied quickly. I had no idea. Victor stared at me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. Do you know why I married you, Meredith? The question caught me off guard. What are you talking about? I married you because you were calm, steady, the opposite of the chaos I've had to deal with my entire life. He stood, his imposing frame casting a shadow over me. But lately, I've started to wonder if I misjudged you. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Victor shook his head, his expression hard. Stay out of this, Meredith. Whatever Ezra is planning, it won't end well for him, or for you, if you're involved. With that, he grabbed the USB drive and left the room, leaving me alone with the weight of his warning. That night, I went to the guest house to warn Ezra. He was sitting at his desk, poring over papers, his expression tense. Victor knows, I said as soon as I walked in. Ezra looked up sharply. Knows what? About your investigation, I said. He found the USB drive. He's on to you, Ezra. You have to stop this before it's too late. Ezra leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I told you, Meredith, I can't stop now. If I back down, he'll bury me. Do you hear yourself? I said, my voice rising. You're putting us both at risk. Ezra stood, his expression darkening. There's no us, Meredith. Don't delude yourself. His words cut like a knife, but before I could respond, he stepped closer, his tone softening. But there could be, he said, his hand brushing against mine. Ezra, stop, I said, pulling away. This isn't about us. This is about you and your obsession with Victor. You think I'm obsessed? He snapped. Do you even know the things he's done? The people he's hurt? He deserves everything that's coming to him. And what about me? I asked, my voice trembling. What do I deserve? Ezra's eyes softened. You deserve better. But you'll never get it as long as you're with him. His words hung in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. I turned to leave, but Ezra grabbed my arm. I need you, Meredith, he said urgently. If you won't help me, then you're no better than he is. The next day, Victor announced that he was hosting a dinner for a few business associates. I knew better than to believe it was just a casual gathering. Victor didn't do casual. That evening, as the guests arrived, I played the role of the dutiful wife, greeting them with a smile and serving drinks. Ezra was notably absent, claiming he had errands to run. But as the night wore on, I noticed Victor's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. He was quieter than usual, his gaze flicking to me more often than necessary. After the guests left, Victor called me into his office. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. What's this about? I asked, my stomach churning. Victor opened a drawer and pulled out a file. He slid it across the desk toward me. I hesitated before opening it, my breath catching as I saw the contents. Photos, dozens of them. Me and Ezra, talking in the guest house, walking together in the garden, even the fleeting moment when our hands had touched. I had my investigator keep an eye on you, Victor said, his tone icy. Imagine my surprise when I found out what you've been doing behind my back. Victor, I can explain, I began, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. Save it, he said. I don't want your excuses. What I want is for you to tell me exactly what Ezra is planning. My mind raced. If I betrayed Ezra, he would destroy me. But if I didn't, Victor would. I don't know what he's planning, I said finally. Victor's eyes narrowed. Wrong answer. He leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. If you're protecting him, you'll regret it, Meredith. I promise you that. Later that night, I found Ezra waiting for me in the guest house. His expression was grim, his usual confidence replaced by something darker. What did he say to you? Ezra asked. He knows, I said. He has photos of us. He wants me to betray you. Ezra's jaw tightened. And are you going to? I hesitated, then shook my head. No, but we have to end this, Ezra, before it destroys both of us. Ezra didn't respond. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a gun. What are you doing? I asked, my voice shaking. Taking care of it, he said simply. No, I said, grabbing his arm. You can't. This isn't the answer. It's the only answer, he said, pulling away from me. I followed Ezra to the main house, my heart pounding with every step. Victor was in his office, the light spilling into the hallway. Ezra burst through the door, the gun in his hand. Ezra, Victor said, his voice calm. Put the gun down. Not until you admit what you've done, Ezra said, his voice shaking. Victor laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think this is about justice? This is about you trying to prove you're better than me. But you're not. You'll never be. Ezra's hand trembled, his finger hovering over the trigger. Ezra, stop, I said, stepping into the room. This isn't the way. Victor turned to me, his expression twisting into a sneer. And you, what did he promise you? Freedom? Love? You're a fool if you think he cares about you. I care more than you ever did. Ezra shot back. The tension in the room was unbearable. And then, in an instant, it was over. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the small space. When the smoke cleared, Victor lay slumped over his desk, blood pooling beneath him. The room was still. The silence broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of my own heartbeat. Victor's lifeless body slumped over his desk, the crimson stain spreading beneath him, a stark contrast to the polished wood. Ezra stood frozen, the gun still clutched in his trembling hand. His face was pale, his breath ragged, as though he was struggling to comprehend what he had just done. Ezra, I said, my voice trembling. We need to call someone. He turned to me slowly, his eyes wide and glassy. No, he said, shaking his head. No one can know. We can't just leave him like this, I said, my chest tightening. Ezra's expression hardened, his usual confidence returning like a mask. We don't have a choice. If anyone finds out, we're both finished. The hours that followed were a blur of fear and desperation. Ezra moved with a chilling efficiency, wiping down the gun, wrapping Victor's body in a tarp, and hauling it into the trunk of his car. Where are you taking him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There's a spot, Ezra said, avoiding my gaze. Near the lake, no one will find him. I wanted to stop him, to tell him that what we were doing was wrong. But the words wouldn't come. I stood in the doorway, paralyzed, as Ezra drove off into the night. When he returned hours later, his clothes were damp, his hands covered in dirt. He didn't say a word, and I didn't ask. In the days that followed, I struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy. I cleaned the house, prepared meals, and answered calls from Victor's business associates with a steady voice. He's out of town, I said each time, repeating the lie until it felt like a script. But the weight of what we'd done was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock at the door, sent my heart racing. I was convinced the police would come, that someone would discover the truth. Ezra, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He continued with his plans, accessing Victor's accounts and transferring money into new ones. It's all falling into place, he said one evening, a rare smile on his face. Falling into place? I repeated, incredulous. We killed a man, Ezra, your father. He wasn't a father to me, Ezra said coldly. And you were never his wife, not really. His words stung, but I didn't argue. It wasn't until a week later that I discovered the depth of Ezra's betrayal. I was in the guest house, looking for a document Victor had asked me to keep safe when I found it. A second laptop, hidden beneath a pile of clothes. The files on the laptop revealed everything. Ezra's investigation into Victor wasn't just about uncovering his father's secrets, it was about eliminating him. There were detailed plans, messages to a mysterious contact, and even a list of assets Ezra intended to claim once Victor was gone. I scrolled through the files, my hands shaking. Among them was a folder labeled Meredith. I hesitated, then clicked it open. Inside were photos of me, some candid, others clearly taken without my knowledge. There were notes, too, detailing how Ezra had used me to get closer to Victor, how he had manipulated me into trusting him. My stomach churned as I read his cold, calculated words. Meredith is the key. She's weak, but she'll do whatever it takes to protect herself. When I confronted Ezra that night, he didn't deny it. You're angry, he said calmly, leaning against the kitchen counter. I understand that. Angry? I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. You used me, Ezra. You lied to me. I did what I had to do, he said, his tone unrepentant. Victor was a monster, and you were trapped. I freed you. Freed me? I spat. You destroyed everything. Ezra's expression darkened. Don't act like you didn't benefit from this, Meredith. You wanted out just as much as I did. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. You're no better than him. For the first time, Ezra's calm facade cracked. You don't mean that, he said, stepping closer. Stay away from me, I said, backing toward the door. Meredith, he said softly, his voice almost pleading, you don't have to do this. We can still make this work. But I didn't believe him. That night, I made my decision. I packed a bag and drove to the police station, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I told them everything. About the affair, the secrets, the murder. I gave them the files I had found on Ezra's laptop, detailing his plans and the evidence against Victor. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it was also the only way to free myself from the nightmare Ezra had dragged me into. The police acted quickly. Ezra was arrested the next day, his confident smirk replaced by a look of betrayal when he saw me standing on the porch, watching as they took him away. You did this, he said, his voice cold. I didn't respond. Victor's death was ruled a homicide, and while Ezra bore the brunt of the blame, I wasn't spared entirely. The investigation revealed my involvement in covering up the crime, and though I avoided prison, I was sentenced to probation and community service. The house was sold, the proceeds split among Victor's distant relatives. I left town shortly after, determined to start over. Now, as I sit in my small apartment in a city far from where it all began, I reflect on the choices that led me here. There are moments when I wonder if things could have turned out differently, if I had been stronger, braver, less willing to let others dictate my life. But wondering doesn't change the past. I've started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. The canvases fill the empty walls of my apartment, their vibrant colors a small reminder that life can still hold beauty, even after everything I've lost. As for Ezra, I haven't heard from him since his conviction. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I think about his final words to me. We could have had it all. Perhaps we could have, but we didn't. And now, all I can do is move forward.